Welcome to the AOA Future in Orthopedic Surgery podcast series. This AOA podcast series will focus on the future in orthopedic surgery and the impact on leaders in our profession. These podcasts will focus on the vast spectrum of change that will occur as the future reveals itself. We will consider changes as they occur in the domains of culture, employment, technology, scope of practice, compensation, and other areas. My name is Doug Lundy, host for this podcast series. Joining us today is Dr. Keith Kenter. Dr. Kenter is a professor of orthopedic surgery at the University of Missouri in Columbia. He is a physician researcher who specializes in shoulder injury and tissue damage repair. He previously served as the chair at the program in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we're about to discuss that transition at length. He went to college at DePauw University in Indiana, then to graduate school at St. Louis University, where he got his master's degree. Went to medical school at the University of Missouri School of Medicine and did his residency at Duke, followed by his fellowship in sports medicine at the Hospital for Special Surgery. He currently serves as the secretary of the American Orthopaedic Association after having previously served as the chair of the Critical Issues Committee. So welcome, Dr. Kenter, to the podcast, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Lundy. I appreciate it.
And Keith and I have known each other for quite a while, and Keith is in a unique position because he was chair at Kalamazoo, and now he is a staff orthopedic surgeon working at Mizzou at a large department there. And we're going to talk about leading as a follower and leading after you were the leader and then moving to a different position and do that, because it's a very unique and intriguing position that I think a lot of our members probably are either in themselves or they can identify with. Is that cool, Keith?
Yeah, it's a great topic. I never really formalized my thoughts on it, so I think this is an opportunity to articulate some ideas.
Yeah, so let's start at Kalamazoo. And why don't you tell us about your time at Kalamazoo, about the program, about your leadership development there, and what your final position was there before you left?
Yeah, well, thank you. So number one, I would do it all over again. For me, it was the perfect job. And it was an emotional move. I was at University of Cincinnati. I was residency director there for 14 plus years, and leaving my partners and leaving Peter Stern, my chair, was quite emotional. But it was an incredible opportunity to, number one, build a new medical school and transform I would say, a community practice of education into a higher level of scholarly activity. And I think if I look back on that as chair, probably what I'm most proud of is developing a longitudinal educational program for musculoskeletal education, not just orthopedics, but musculoskeletal education from the first year med student to the fifth year orthopedic surgeon. And that's what I was hired to do. And I think that's my greatest legacy. But getting back to the department, yeah, it was kind of just a classic chair. We had 35 faculty, incredible educators, but not a lot of higher level of scholarly activity. By the time I left, I had promoted, I think, 3. The fourth one was in the works, but so I'll say 4 individuals to an associate professor. So the concept of understanding evidence-based medicine and pushing that culture of higher level of scholarly activity is what I got the greatest joy for. Then it was not only about, I mean, selfishly, it was pats on the back to Keith Kenter. It was really about personal growth for those individuals and to give opportunities to our medical students and residents. And I saw a lot of faculty personally grow through stepping off the clinical treadmill, if you will, and using different parts of their brain. So I was really proud of that. That soon developed and transformed into an offer from the dean, who hired me to sit and take on Associate Dean of Clinical Affairs. And then that transformed into a CMO, Chief Credentialing Officer. And unfortunately, with some of the cuts and the financial strains that we all were going through after COVID, they consolidated the surgical services, and I became chair of what they call surgical services. The Department of Orthopedic Surgery became a division at the general surgery, cardiothoracic surgery, and OB. So I had 3 residencies under my, I guess, belt, if you will, and over 150 faculty that I was trying to manage at different service lines and subspecialties. That was probably not what I was set up to do, and that put me into the 10th year point, which I felt it was probably time to pass the baton because I wasn't really even operating. I wasn't teaching orthopedic surgeons, it was just too much administrative duty, which I was not ready to do. And then this job at University of Missouri opened up, and Jim Standard is my current chair.
Wow, that's quite a story. Oh my gosh. So let's recap a couple of things. How long were you at Cincinnati?
15 years.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And we were just talking with Mike Archdeacon earlier today, who's the current chair at Cincinnati, as you know. And when you were there, it was Dr. Stern, right?
Dr. Stern. And then Michael, I endorsed Michael. And then Michael was my chair for maybe a year.
Okay.
And then I told him, see ya. No, and it was hard. Michael and I are still, he's a great friend. He's more than a friend. I mean, we kind of grew up together. Yeah. Wonderful person.
Yeah. He's a great guy. And so then you were at Kalamazoo for 10 years.
Correct.
So many people would consider that position at Kalamazoo to kind of be the epitome of what they were trying to do in their leadership journey, a tremendous amount of leadership and authority and opportunity to do stuff. But you found it to be oppressive and not what you wanted to do. Am I putting words in your mouth, or were you just thinking 10 years was good enough time for transition? What?
Yeah.
So walk us through that.
A great question. I don't think there was ever really a timeline. I think reflection, which we all do as leaders, is really important. I think one thing that me personally, what I think we need to really work on is foresight. And I think the direction of where the school was going, that would have been my 3rd dean in 10 years. And this was not a dean decision. This was a board decision. So the board had pivoted, and I think the academic mission was probably not as important at the community hospitals. But for me, Doug, I think it was just time. I make a few comments. I would do it all over again. I loved it. I am so proud of the residency, so proud of the department, of what we were able to accomplish, left under what I feel is good terms. And again, it was emotional. My first job was here at University of Missouri. Walter Green had hired me from New York, and, I'm a med student here. So my first job was here as a sports medicine doctor, took care of the teams, developed some of the shoulder reconstruction service line here. And which is interesting is my service line director is a former resident. I am definitely coming back home. I'm from St. Louis. My family lives in St. Louis. So I think there's a lot of points that go into an equation that help an individual make a decision when they step down for leadership. For me, there were some personal things. My parents are getting very old. I was traveling from Kalamazoo to St. Louis every other weekend with my mom's health. And we hadn't seen, our kids were scattered throughout the country. Now, Patty and I are back home, and all 3 of our children now have moved back to the St. Louis and Columbia area. So for me, it was just timing.
That's an intriguing story. Now you and I are friends, and I talked with you when this is going on. I don't think we got this far into it. This is a very interesting thing to discuss, because I think a lot of folks may run into this position at some point in their career, and they may end up in the same position that you're in, where they have to make this decision to say, I was looking for leadership, I found leadership, I continue to get promoted within leadership, and now I'm going to step back and go the opposite direction. That does take a lot of soul searching. How long did it take you to work through all that?
Probably 6 months.
And
Yeah, I would do it all over again. And it's not like I was unhappy, but I would say I lost my core values. I wasn't teaching orthopedic residents. I wasn't operating, and I wasn't ready to give that up. The job evolved into something different. I could have done it. I could have done it with joy. I could have personally grown with it. There was challenges. How you speak to an orthopedic surgeon is completely different how you speak and problem solve with an OB, GYN, or a cardiothoracic surgeon. Root
Right.
causes, but your strategies on how you navigate those solutions are a little bit different. So there's no question I could have continued to grow. We love the community, but I was empty. I wasn't operating, and I wasn't ready to give that up. And I missed the residents. And you
Wow.
know me,
Yeah.
I'm an educator, and it was just time. And this job opened up, so it was timing's everything.
So when Jim Stannard offered you the job there at Mizzou, you're a staff orthopedic surgeon there. You're one of the sports medicine doctors that's on faculty that's teaching residents, but you don't have any leadership roles, right?
He gave me the sports medicine and shoulder fellowship. I'm director of
Okay.
that. So, by title,
Right.
yeah, I kid my partner and Matt Smith, who's my partner, and some of my other partners, Dr. Della Rocca, Greg, I am low man in the community
Mm-hmm.
because I'm now 80% clinical. So I went from 0.05 clinical
Wow.
to 80% clinical, and then I have one research day and rocking it. It's so much fun. Now,
Okay, let's explore into that some. So, well, let me start off. What regrets do you have in your new job, or what things? Let me put it this way: what things do you miss from Kalamazoo to your current job?
well, number one, we're physicians. Number two, we're surgeons. And number three, we're leaders. So we all have egos. So I think, and I want to say this without being arrogant. I think there's a component of not the buck stops here kind of thing. So, right, to make the decision, I don't have to do that anymore. And I think it was a relief in some situations, but it's also an internal conflict. Like this is how I would do it. This is not how I would want a different culture if I was a leader. And this is not directed at Jim. It's just, those are things like, why can't I make those decisions to move the department in this direction? Well, it's not my job anymore to do that, which
Right.
gets into this topic of leading up, but that's a selfish component, so I think it's really important to understand my chair at two levels. I think I need to understand his priorities, and I need to understand his perceptions for the goals that he wants to create. And I think that takes time. I've only been here a year, and Jim's a great guy. But the point that I'm trying to make, maybe not too well, but the point that I'm trying to make is I'm trying to foster alignment so he can win personally, but more importantly, the organization can win and achieve
Right.
the goal. That's what this comes down to.
And to put things in timeline, how long are you going to be in your current job, do you think? What's your perspective there?
Yeah, as you know, I just got elected as a director to ABOS, so I've got 10-year commitment of
That's
having a
true.
clinical practice.
Yeah.
So
Congratulations on that, by the way. Yeah.
well, thank you. Yeah, 10 years. But
Okay.
I kind of knew that coming in. And Jim and I have talked about that, about when is it time to step down and retire. And what I told him, because he wanted my perception on perspective on that. And I said, there's no timeline. Just let it grow organically. At least that's how I did it. I mean, you did the same thing. And when you stepped down and moved on, I just let it grow organically, and you'll know when it's time. And that's not very scientific, I think. I think concession planning is very important. You got to have a plan.
Okay, Keith, let's try and get a perspective comparing Kalamazoo to where you currently are. Compared to Kalamazoo, how many orthopedic surgeons are in the department at Mizzou?
At Mizzou, there are 45 faculty, which is an institute model. So there's some PM&R, and then there's also faculty at Springfield that are residents rotate part of the
Right.
department. So 45 total that are considered partners that are faculty.
And y'all's facility there is just absolutely spectacular. I've been there, and
Yeah.
it's quite the model. And the other thing is that you guys have a lot of strength on the bench. You already talked about Greg De La Rocca. You have Brett. I know the trauma guys really well. Brett, Chris there. You've got a bunch of really strong leaders in your department. And why don't you discuss that a little bit when you come in as chair, as the main guy at Kalamazoo, and now you're coming in and you're surrounded by other strong leaders. And you talked previously about the ego with that. I think you really kind of uncovered the main thing there. A lot of people say, what's it like to my ego for me to come in and now be working under a man or a woman who's the chair when I was the guy or the woman doing all that?
Yeah, great question. I have so much respect and pride to be a partner with these other great people. Yeah, and you pointed out, right? They're great leaders, they're great surgeons, but I'll tell you and that was probably the biggest thing that attracted me here. They're great people. They're just good, great people. And that's, for me, that sold it, right? And that's the culture. We take care of each other. We're family. And I know it sounds kind of cliche, but strength in numbers. I think healthcare is hard, and strength in numbers. We've got each other's back. I love we were a little spread out at Kalamazoo, but I love the collaborative spirit and camaraderie. I can walk down the hallway and talk to one of my spine partners about someone I'm confused if it's shoulder pathology or neck pathology, and it's all patient-centric. It's really special.
Okay. And let's consider, as you said earlier, about the idea of leading up. How does that work for you? And how does it, knowing that Jim's probably going to listen to this, how does it work that you can influence Jim and other leaders within the department as a staff orthopedic surgeon who formerly was the chair elsewhere? How do you instrument that? How do you influence change from your current position?
Yeah, it was probably very similar to the way that I did it as a chair, as the man, as you say, or the person calling the shots. Yeah, I think, for me, I think it's always been about teamwork. So I think it's really important to stress, listen, none of this is about me, right? It's about the organization. It's about the institute. It's about the department. It's about the system. We've all read the book, The First 90 Days. It takes me more than 90 days to figure things out. But I would say trying to understand and I alluded to this, trying to understand the priorities, the perceptions, the goals of the department. Now, how do you do that? I think you've got to be an active listener. And I'm not speaking up. I would say the first 8 months, I'm not, unless they ask me, but I'm just listening. And I think that's for me, that's really important. The other thing is I think you need to be empathetic in the ways they design either strategies or come up with the answers that they're coming up with. I don't think anything's wrong. I may do something a little bit differently, and we all lead differently, but I think you need to be empathetic in the way they create those strategies to get the goals that we're trying to achieve. And for me, that was really 8 months of trying to understand things. And moving forward now, I think for me, communications is really important. Both active listening and communicating ideas, again, that are not about me. In order to do that, for me, you got to have good credibility. So I need to be dependable. I need to have high quality work, need to lead by example and be productive. And with that, you need to be proactive. I always, when I have my a quarterly meeting with Dr. Stannard or my weekly meeting, I always say, what can I do? What can I do to help you? I very rarely had a faculty member ask me that. What can I do to help you? And I think that's an important, and I'm sincere with that. What do you need me to do? I'm here for you. And I think that shows support. And I think that adds to your credibility. Now, that's my approach. And you might have to interview Dr. Stannard next to see what he thinks. But that's my approach. And it's never really been about me.
Okay, that's great. Jim's not going to be upset about that, and he can easily use your talents in many ways, and he would leverage that. Speaking of which, you are the leader of the fellowship, and you also got leadership role within the AOA as secretary, and then also, of course, for 10 years on the ABOS board, which there's a tremendous amount of leadership that occurs in that capacity. How are those other opportunities scratching your leadership itch compared to what you had did previously at Kalamazoo?
That's a great question. I don't know if I've really thought that through, comparing and contrasting. I've been an examiner for 10 plus years. I've written questions for ABOS. I know the players. I'm familiar with that culture. And that is clearly an organization that's about our profession. It's about our profession, and to try to elevate the game. I think that's probably what I love most, that kind of servant leadership. I think for me, that's always been that core value of that servant leadership. And that probably goes even back, leading by example. That goes back to my hockey playing days as a captain of a minor league hockey team. It's just leading by example and being servant so others can grow and the team or the organization can improve. I think that the contrast between here and Western Michigan is there's a stronger tradition of higher level of scholarly activity that I would say it was not good at scholarly activity, but just not high impact stuff. I think both places graduate outstanding orthopedic residents that are going to be good general orthopedic surgeons for their communities. But the scholarly activity of writing grants, getting promoted was not as maybe emphasized. And there's a strong tradition like here, and that's what people want to do. They want to move on.
And you bring up a very interesting concept from your perspective in that you're working with Jim Stannard and the really good functional leadership structure at Mizzou. And you've talked about leading by example and putting the needs of the organization first and being selfless, as you discuss. However, I'm sure some of our members are not in the nicer position that you're in, where they may have been a leader before, or they're aspiring to be a leader. They serve under a leader that may not be as empathetic and as effective and as polished a leader as Jim Stannard is. What advice would you give them besides lead by example, besides consider the needs of the organization first, besides being selfless and a servant leader? What would you tell those folks if they said, all right, I get it, I'm in a position and I really don't have as much respect for my chair as you do? What do I do in that situation in terms of leading up, trying to influence the organization from a more informal position?
I think two things. I think you got to understand the leader. And I've alluded to that, right? You really have to understand the leader. You understand what they're trying to do, how they lead, right? There's different styles of leadership. And I think that's really important. How I do something, Jim Stannard may not do that, and vice versa. That doesn't mean that we're not effective in getting at a higher level for the organization. So I think it's very important to be empathetic and understand the reasons why those strategies or those projects or whatever has been put in place. I think you have to understand that. You got to show empathy and truly understand in order to get to that next level of fostering alignment. So I think the second thing is being patient. And that becomes hard. So how long do you want to be patient before it's time to move on? If you're not personally growing, then that's a problem. If you're not, and I've always argued this, and you've heard me say this, it is really hard to find seats around the table of leadership. There's just not a lot of positions. And I think you've got to be creative to let people lead and develop and grow. And, sometimes it's a title, sometimes it's not. It's what this comes down to. And I think there's different ways of leading up, leading without authority. And what I mean by authority is not a title. I think a lot of times the title gives you that power to lead, but you can still lead without that formed title. Sometimes it's harder. And I think that's probably, I have to ask my partners, that's probably given me some credibility. I've had that title, right? So that might have given me a little bit more credibility when I make some statements. But I don't know, you just got to be respectful. I just really believe you have to understand where they're coming from, and that's hard, right? We say this all the time, put yourselves in my shoes and try to see it, but you got to be empathetic in why they make strategies. And it's up to the leader. I think it's up to the chair. It's up to the leader to be visionary and communicate, to explain why those things are being done.
Do you have any epiphanies that, if learning what you've learned in your new position, that if you had to go back and do it again at Kalamazoo or at Mizzou or at Cincinnati or wherever, that you do something different because of something you've learned along this pathway?
Yeah, I think the two hard knocks for me, I wouldn't say I've lost friendships, but I lost some faculty that moved on. We just didn't see eye to eye, and that bothered me because they're good people. And I think two things with some of these. One, I made it about me. That was a mistake. And number two, I wasn't patient enough.
Did you realize that while you were there? Or did that come up now that you're at Mizzou?
Probably when those conversations don't go well and you could see it spiraling. So as a leader, you're seeing one of your faculty now being disengaged. I probably found that soon after they left, that I probably made some of that about me instead of the department. I mean, there's a lot of factors go into it, but I probably wasn't patient enough.
Yeah. And Arch and I we were discussing this earlier. One of the big issues that leaders are supposed to do is work on strategic development, strategic planning, and then also succession planning. It's our job to develop our other leaders so that they can succeed us and move into our position or other things as well. How are you working, helping Jim Stannard and the guys and women at Mizzou in terms of succession planning and helping? I imagine that for Jim specifically, you could be a tremendous resource to help to develop leadership within the department.
When I first got here, Jim was putting together some ideas, and there was discussions about we need to start developing vice chairs. We didn't have a lot of vice chairs. There was a few that were titled, but no real job description with that. It was a title. And so a couple of these individuals that he named came to me and said, what do you do as a vice chair? So I had formalized that process at Western Michigan, and we were in the process of creating some other positions for vice chairs. So I took those documents and just offered it to him. I said, here's some ideas that I was putting together for my dean. And I said, and the job description was there and bullet points of what they should be doing on an annual basis. And I think some of it he used and some of it he didn't, but he was very appreciative of that. It was just adding resources for him to help navigate to develop these chairs. Now we've got 3 new vice chairs. The biggest one was at the time the vice chair DEI, and that had to be, with the state school, we had to change the title of that. And I said, here's an idea. Just give them, this is what we were going through at Western Michigan because it was mandated by the state, cultural awareness. And I think that's some of the terminology that he was using, but it was formalized, right? And it was paper. It was do what you want with it. So that's one example. Another example, I've got a young faculty member that's in the process. I sit on a PhD committee with our PhD candidates that are in our lab. And one of my partners is trying to get her PhD, and we were coming out of the meeting, and I'm working on this grant, and I just offered my services. But if you want me to review it, I'll be more than happy to edit it and review it. You got to be kidding me. You're so busy. I said, no, just send it over. Give me more than 24 hours to get it done, but be more than happy to review it. So I think those types of things, showing that proactive approach and just being part of the team to help them get through it. And, it'd be interesting to ask Jim. I get a sense sometimes that some folks are afraid to ask me to do stuff because I've done it before. They don't want to burden me with that again.
Yeah.
So
right.
Trying to understand. So I always ask them, what can I do to help you? What do you need me to do? Well, just be yourself. Okay. That's easy. Next quarter, I'm going to ask them the same thing. Is there something I need to do? And you have to be careful what you ask for. I'm now the chair of the academic achievement, so I got to figure out the finances on my partner's academic scholarly activity. Another thankless job. But it's great. It decompresses him. We got the same goals. We're getting our department to the next level. So that gives me, frankly, it's not a lot of fun. Because it's money again, but it's an opportunity to get our department to a higher level as it relates to thinking about very classic academic mission and how we can improve that and help each other. And that's where I'm taking it. And it's hopefully Jim likes that.
Keith, this has been spectacular. Very interesting perspective that I think is going to be so incredibly helpful for so many people because it shows a different perspective in leading from somebody who was the top leader and then is now leading from a different perspective. I know you, and I know that you are so content and fulfilled in this position. So as a parting blow, and I know where you're going to go with it, but I want you to say it, is what would you tell folks in terms of the perpetual legacy, sustainable method of leadership when you're leading from a following position? How can we manifest ourselves as the best leaders possible within our organization without necessarily having the top title?
I just have fun. I love watching people grow, and if I could be a part of that and help them get to where they need to be, that's the greatest joy I get. I just have fun. I come to work every day having fun. I think that's really important. It engages the team around you. They want to work for you. They want to be a part of that positive approach we're helping people. That's what this comes down to. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that's it. That's it. And being selfless and contributing where we can contribute.
I think it's really important to reflect and look at who you are and what your core values are, and don't deviate from that. And that's that's why I'm so happy and I would say fulfilled, because I'm doing exactly what my core values are. I'm teaching residents, teaching fellows, I'm taking care of patients, and I'm engaged in what I would consider an incredibly department of partners that are really my friends.
Wow, that's a great place to end right there. It has been an absolute pleasure talking with Dr. Keith Kenter, who is a professor of orthopedic surgery at the University of Missouri in Columbia as a physician researcher and as a shoulder specialist there. He's also currently the secretary of the AOA and a newly elected director on the American Board of Orthopedic Surgery, talking today about leading up and leading from a more following position without necessarily having the title and the effectiveness that we can have there.
Keith, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Doug.
And y'all stay tuned for future episodes within this AOA Leadership Podcast channel.